fresh from events at the Emirates last night. We're joined on the line by the Dundalk coach, Shane Keegan. Morning to you, Shane.
How are you getting on, Adrian? You well?
Good. I know you wish you'd be joining us in slightly different circumstances this morning, but I wondered if, given the nature of the burst of goals last night, were you almost happy overall with the 3-0 against a top European side like that, or kicking yourselves almost that it might have been something else for you?
I suppose it depends at what point you ask me. At 40 minutes gone, would we have taken 3-0? Absolutely not. And at 47 minutes, would we have taken 3-0 100%? It was just, they really turned the screw on us during that short period. Look, if you were to say at the start of the night, given that we have such a big game against Pats coming this Sunday, and knowing that Arsenal do have the ability to maybe knock 6 or 7 past you when they're really, really on it, we probably would have taken it, because I think we can kind of head into Sunday with our reputation and our heads reasonably high,
How frustrating was it with the 2 goals that came in such quick succession, having done so well up to that point? And I know the sloppy nature almost of them, Shane, was that, I presume, all the more frustrating? Yeah, absolutely, and the players would know that themselves, so they were very frustrated and annoyed with themselves at half time, as you say, the manner of the 2. I think the second one has been a bit unlucky because the shot has rebounded right into his path. But yeah, no, it was because to kind of undergo such an onslaught at times and do so well for as you say, for the mistakes then to come in that manner is frustrating. I mean, I thought, to be honest with you, one of the most impressive things that the lads did last night was their ability to defend inside the 18-yard box without actually clipping somebody or handling a ball or something like that was really, really impressive. So, yeah, on the flip side, then you do have to be a bit annoyed at the manner of the 2 goals. And it's the set-piece thing again, almost, that comes back to haunt you a little bit. What's happening in the dressing room at half-time then, just given that it's such a hammer blow, and against a team like that, very difficult to get back into it. So what's happening in the dressing room at half-time in terms of the overall mood and trying to get people back on track? Yeah,
again, to be fair, I mean, the way Filippo was looking at it is, you do have to focus on how positive a 40-minute period it was, rather than zoning in too much on the final 5 minutes. And that was the approach that he took. And again, in fairness to him, there's very little point in crying over spilled milk. So there was very little said about the goals. It was more so a case of looking at, is there anything we can do a bit better here to try and keep the ball and to try and relieve some of the pressure. Now, look, obviously, I mean, they're going to do that to absolutely anybody. You're looking at all these different bits and pieces of information leading up to them, and without getting too geeky, there's a stat called PPDA, the amount of passes played per defensive action, and Arsenal was one of the lowest in the whole of Europe. The opposition averaged around 5 passes before they managed to turn the ball over, or they certainly did against Rapid Vienna. It was just under 5 actually, so it was the previous week. So they're going to do that to almost everybody, not just us. But at the same time, I suppose Filippo's focus was, can we do this a little bit better to try and retain it, or can we do that a little bit better to try and retain it, rather than just talking for 45 minutes about how we were going to defend when we didn't have the ball,
Yeah. On that point, I was looking at it a bit last night. Arsenal did maybe what you might expect, to press up high, putting pressure on Dundalk, trying to play it out from the back almost. When that's happening to you, how difficult is it to stick to your first principles of wanting to play it out from the back, or trying to play a bit of football, versus, oh, screw it, listen, we're getting squeezed here and maybe putting a bit of pressure on ourselves, let's just back it along?
Yeah, it's a fine balance, that's for sure, because I think we did make a decent effort to try and stick to our principles. I did, but at the same time, sometimes fellas are going, oh, hold on, if I stick to my principles this time around, there's a chance that the ball could end up in the back of the net fairly quickly on me. And look, it was always a mix of just trying to get that balance somewhat right, in that, we were never going to play it short every single time, but we had to make sure that we weren't going to kick it long every single time either. To at least try and keep them guessing. And, when you look at some of the goals they had conceded, it came from trying to suck them up so that you could find a bit of space in behind. And sure, obviously, if we just keep kicking the ball along, then it's impossible to find space in behind. So, look, again, I'd be perfectly honest with Filippo is probably a bit braver than I would have been in that respect. I don't know what I have been as, as confident in keep hammering that message home to the lads. And I think it was the right thing to do. I think it absolutely was the right thing to do. But there were occasions where they had to go a bit more direct, which is natural enough. But I think, there does seem to have been a couple of interviews where Mikel Arteta did praise our attempts to try and play football, which is great to hear.
Who was Joe Willock is obviously getting a lot of praise this morning. Who was the player that impressed you most last night on the Arsenal side?
For me, I think, to be honest with you, I think it was probably Reece Nelson. For a fella who ordinarily probably wouldn't get in touching distance of an Arsenal match day 18, it's just ridiculous to see him in action. And actually, look, that applies to most of them. But he in particular, I'm probably speaking for the players really more so than myself there, because you do throw it at players and you ask them who impressed them most, and I said it was half a dozen of them kind of came back with Disney when I was chatting to them in the airport and that kind of thing. Chris Shields says he's given him his number one vote in the FIFA World Player of the Year vote this year. So that's how impressed he was by a fella, as I say, who normally can't even make their match day 18, such as their strength and depth. But look, Willock, Pepe, so many of them, they really, really were. Just it's you see this stat of the fact that we didn't make a foul in the 90 minutes. There's pros and cons, and there's reasons why that stat came up.
Was the stat about not racking up any fouls? Was that a deliberate effort, Shane, last night?
Most definitely not, Owen. Most definitely not. And I think we made one or two balls to try and foul them at times. But no, it definitely wasn't. Quite the opposite of anything, really. But look, you just have to hand it to them. At times you have to get close to them to be able to foul them. And they have both on. They have the physique, which makes it very hard to get close to them because they move so fast as an individual. Then obviously they're moving the ball so fast that you're running towards somebody and you might have intentions of trying to lay a bit on him, but he moves that ball so fast again that by the time you're getting there you're thinking, okay, like I'm going to be so late here that if I do, like, this is going to be a red, so I just need to put the brakes on rather than making a foul at all. So no, it definitely wasn't intention. It's just one of those kind of strange quirks on the night, I think.
Chief Ignoli reminded me of a young fella at Fairground Park last night, Shane, who had sort of tested the waters a bit with a ride that he shouldn't be on and sort of slips past the barrier a little bit and is like, nobody said anything to me, so I'll just keep going. He was in the technical area. Was that just a chance my arm here and see if we can get away with it?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's one that we wouldn't be drawing too much attention to right enough, so it wouldn't. But look, it allowed him to be able to do the full of his role a bit better, which was great from that perspective,
Yeah. Well, you still got plenty of TV time. You'd be delighted to hear with the the official protocols around UEFA, you being the coach and all that.
They know how to get the TV ratings up, Adrian.
Did you? I know he was trying to get Liam Brady at some point to have a chat just about Arsenal and about obviously a guy who watches a lot of English football and been involved in Arsenal over the years. Did you get him in the end?
Yeah, he did. He had a good chat with him about I don't know if weaknesses is probably too strong of a word to use, but areas where there might be opportunities for us. So he was delighted with that. Obviously, Liam having had the career that he had in England, he'd be a name that he'd be massively aware of. So yeah, look, that was helpful. Any little kind of bits and pieces that you can get. I suppose we were fully aware, obviously, that they had Barry Solan involved, and they also had Owen Clarkin, who's obviously our former strength and conditioning coach, involved with their women's team. So they had a couple of inside sources themselves that were going to be able to give them bits and pieces, that was for sure. So we had to try and maximise every effort we could to try and get as much on them as possible as well too. Little bits that you wouldn't know just from watching them week in, week out, let's say.
Yeah, and how, from that point of view, how interesting was it for you over the last few days in the lead into that game? Sort of like a bit of a different quality of player to have to review and advise about.
Yeah, it sure was. And strangely enough, Adrian, from a different perspective, it was kind of a little bit harder because I always knew, or well, didn't know, but I always had a fair idea that the likes of Reece Nelson and Joe Willock and Eddie and Ketia, maybe to a slightly lesser extent, but we knew these guys were going to be in the starting lineup. And then, obviously they're not getting a huge amount of game time. So, when you're preparing to take on Molde as we did the previous week, there's endless footage of all these different players and the team style of play in general, whereas we actually did have to kind of scratch around a little bit more for the Arsenal stuff, because you need to go to the Carabao Cup games to find games where those guys have started, rather than looking at how they did against Leicester, last Sunday evening. So there is a bit more work to do from that side of things, and you're maybe putting together a couple of individual clips on a few of those fellas. But look, in saying that, at the same time, Arteta is so principled and so definitely in his philosophy that, if El Nani is playing in, Granit Xhaka's position, well, then he'll do pretty much exactly what Granit Xhaka does. If Reece Nelson is playing in, Aubameyang's position, you can be pretty sure he'll do pretty much exactly what Aubameyang does, certainly in terms of their movements and their patterns of play and that kind of stuff, because it's so nailed down with them. But it was a different challenge at the same time, but equally enjoyable, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, listen, well done, if that's the right phrase this morning. Tough place to go. Thanks a million for taking the call, as always, after those games. Thanks, Shane.
No problem, lads.
Shane Keegan there, the Dundalk coach in the line after that 3-0 defeat at the Emirates last night.